Have you ever felt that your prayers are not being heard? Have you wondered why some people seem to receive answers while you continue to wait? If so, I want you to know that you are not alone. Today, we are going to discover the 5 most important mistakes that Padre Pio, that great saint who bore the stigmata of Christ, taught us about prayer. Perhaps you are making one of these mistakes without realizing it, and that could be preventing your prayers from being answered. But there is one mistake in particular, the 4th, that Padre Pio himself considered the most dangerous of all. It is so serious that many people have lost years of blessings without knowing they were making it. The most worrying thing is that the majority do not even realize it exists. If you believe in the power of prayer, write in the comments, "I believe in the power of prayer." This simple act of faith will help this message reach more people who need it. Padre Pio, with his immense wisdom and deep connection with God, helped thousands of people throughout his life. Many came to him in desperation, wondering why their prayers did not seem to be heard. And do you know what he discovered? That most of them made the same mistakes over and over again without realizing it. Imagine for a moment that you have a phone, but you do not know how to use it correctly. Perhaps you dial the wrong numbers or do not even know how to turn it on. Could you communicate with someone like that? In the same way, prayer is our direct line to God. But if we do not use it correctly, communication will be affected. The most striking thing is that these mistakes can be so subtle that we could go years ignoring them. Even people who have prayed all their lives may be falling into them unknowingly and wondering why their prayers are not bearing fruit. But there is good news. Once you identify these mistakes, you can correct them immediately. And when you do, the transformation will be amazing. What I'm going to share with you today is not complicated theories or elaborate rituals. These are simple but powerful truths that Padre Pio discovered through his life of prayer, and that he taught those who came to him seeking help and guidance. And before revealing the first mistake, I want you to remember something very important. It does not matter how long you have been praying incorrectly. Today is the perfect day to start doing it right. Padre Pio always said that God is more interested in our future than in our past. So now, let us discover the first mistake, the one he considered the most common obstacle in people's prayer lives. But before we do, if you have not yet subscribed to this channel of blessings, do so right now, so you do not miss any of the teachings and revelations we share every week. The first mistake that Padre Pio identified, and that many of us make without realizing it, is the lack of attention while praying. Has it ever happened to you that while praying the rosary, your mind gets distracted by the grocery list? Or that while asking for something important, you get distracted by the noise of the television or your phone? Padre Pio taught us that this is like trying to have a conversation with someone while checking your phone. It does not work, does it? When we pray without paying attention, it is like dialing the wrong number and expecting someone to answer. Prayer is the best weapon we have, said Padre Pio, but it must be done with an attentive heart. He compared distracted prayer to a poorly tuned radio. We can hear noise, but not the real message. Let us put it in an example. Imagine that you are talking to your best friend about something important. But while he is talking to you, you check your messages, watch television, or think about other things. Do you think that conversation will be effective? Will your friend feel heard? In the same way, when we pray distractedly, we are not truly present in our conversation with God. Padre Pio taught us 3 clear signs that show us if we are praying without attention. The first is when we finish praying and do not remember what we just said, as if our lips moved automatically while our heart was elsewhere. The second sign is when we rush to finish the prayer as if it were just another task on our to-do list. Hurry is the enemy of attention. The third is when we pray in places or at times full of distractions without making the effort to find a space of tranquility. But do not worry, Padre Pio also left us the solution to this problem. He recommended starting each prayer with a moment of silence, just like tuning a radio properly before listening to your favorite program. Padre Pio always advised finding a quiet place to pray. It does not have to be an elaborate altar. A silent corner at home is enough. He said that even a small closet could become a space for prayer if we find the peace we need there. Then, he suggested turning off the phone or putting it on airplane mode. 5 minutes of focused prayer are worth more than an hour of distracted prayer because modern distractions are like thieves that steal our attention. He also recommended beginning prayer by taking 3 deep breaths. This simple act helps to calm the mind and heart because, according to him, conscious breathing is like anchoring a ship before setting sail on the journey of prayer. Finally, he advised imagining that we are in God's presence as if he were sitting in front of us. This visualization helps keep the mind focused and the heart attentive, and he assured that when we pray with full attention, wonderful things happen. It is like tuning a radio station correctly. The static disappears and the message becomes clear and crisp. The most beautiful thing about all this is that you do not need to be an expert in prayer to start. For Padre Pio, even a simple, "My God help me," said with full attention is more powerful than 100 prayers said with a scattered mind. Attention in prayer is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the difference between speaking into the air and having a real conversation with God. As he said, in prayer, one word said from the heart is worth more than thousands spoken out of habit. Another common mistake that Padre Pio pointed out in the life of prayer is the lack of gratitude. Many times, we approach God only to ask as if he were a spiritual ATM. Have you noticed how many times a day you ask for things in your prayers and how many times you give thanks? He recounted that once, a distressed woman came to him because she felt that her prayers were not being heard. When he asked her how she prayed, she listed a long list of requests. Then Padre Pio asked her, "And when was the last time you gave thanks for what you already have?" The woman remained silent, unable to remember. Gratitude, he said, is the key that opens the door to more blessings. When we give thanks, we not only recognize the gifts we already have, but also prepare our hearts to receive more. It is like receiving a gift. If you never say thank you, do you think the person will feel motivated to give you another? But why is gratitude so important in prayer? Padre Pio gave us 3 fundamental reasons. First, gratitude helps us see what we already have. Sometimes, we are so busy looking at what we lack that we forget to appreciate the blessings we already possess. It is like having a garden full of flowers, but focusing only on the one plant that is wilting. Second, gratitude changes our attitude. When we start giving thanks, our mind focuses on the positive. It is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, we can see all the good things around us. Third, gratitude strengthens our faith. Remembering past blessings helps us trust in the ones that are yet to come. He used to say that gratitude is the best fertilizer for growing our faith. The most curious thing he discovered is that the most blessed people were not necessarily those who asked the most, but those who gave thanks the most. He compared gratitude to a seed. Every time we give thanks, we plant a seed of blessing in our lives. And to cultivate this habit, he left a very simple practical guide. Start your day by giving thanks for 3 basic things: the gift of life, the air you breathe, and the new day that begins. It may seem simple, but it completely transforms the way you start your morning. Throughout the day, take brief pauses to give thanks for small things. A glass of fresh water, a neighbor's greeting, the smile of a loved one. He said that these small prayers of gratitude are like drops of water that keep the garden of faith green. And before going to sleep, review your day and find at least 5 reasons to give thanks, even on difficult days. Yes, especially on difficult days. For him, there is always something to be grateful for, even if it is just the strength to have survived a challenging day. But the most important thing is to learn to be grateful even for what we do not understand or for what seems negative to us. Sometimes, what appears to be a stone in our path can actually be a step that helps us climb higher. Have you noticed that when you give thanks, your heart feels lighter? It is as if gratitude has the power to transform the weight of our burdens into a feeling of peace and hope. Padre Pio used to say that a grateful person is never completely sad because even in the darkness, they always find a small light. And the truth is, we do not need great reasons to be grateful. The most important blessings are often the simplest ones. Health, family, a roof over our heads, a plate of food on the table. When we learn to see life with grateful eyes, we realize that we are more blessed than we ever imagined. Another great obstacle in the life of prayer, according to Padre Pio, is the lack of trust. Many times we pray like someone tossing a coin into the air without the certainty that we will be heard. We ask, but deep down in our hearts, there are doubts, fears, and uncertainties. Padre Pio often said, "Pray with the confidence of a child and the certainty of a giant." Observe how small children fully trust their parents. They do not worry about tomorrow or doubt that they will be taken care of. That is the kind of trust we need in prayer. To his spiritual children, Padre Pio explained that trust in prayer is like a master key. You may have the most beautiful key in the world, but if you do not believe it will open the door, you will not even try to use it. The same happens with our prayers. Without trust, they are like keys we never truly use. And how does this lack of trust manifest? There are 3 clear signs. The first is when we pray while already thinking of an alternative plan, as if we were telling God, "I am asking you for this, but just in case you do not listen, I already have another solution." True trust does not need backup plans. The second sign is when we impose deadlines on God, believing that if He does not respond within a certain time, it means He has not heard us. But God always responds, even if it is not according to our hurried timelines. The third sign is when, after praying, we continue to carry the same worry as if we had not prayed at all. It is like handing over a letter at the post office and still holding it in our hands. True trust allows us to let go and rest. But Padre Pio did not just point out the problem, he also left us the solution. He taught 3 practical steps to develop unshakable trust in prayer. First, remembering the prayers that have already been answered in our lives. He said that the memory of past blessings is the best fuel for future trust. It is like having a photo album of moments when God has answered us. Second, when praying, visualize that we have already received what we are asking for, not by magic, but by faith. For him, trust allows us to give thanks even before seeing the answer, just like when we expect a gift and feel joy even before receiving it. And third, after praying, make a conscious act of surrender. He suggested saying, "I abandon myself into your hands. I trust in your timing and your way," just as we would hand over the keys to our car to someone we trust completely, without needing to ask every moment if they know how to drive. Something fundamental that Padre Pio taught is that trust does not mean we will never have doubts. Doubts are like passing clouds in the sky. They may appear, but they should not stay. The important thing is not to let them become the foundation of our prayer. He compared trust to building a house. Every time we pray with trust, we place another brick. Every time we overcome a doubt, we strengthen the foundation. Over time, our life of prayer becomes a solid house capable of withstanding any storm of uncertainty or fear. And the most beautiful thing is that God especially honors prayers made with trust. It is as if trust were the language that God's heart understands best. When we pray with trust, we are not trying to convince God to help us. We are simply recognizing that He already wants to help us. However, Padre Pio identified a fourth mistake, perhaps the most dangerous of all: praying only when we are in trouble or have an urgent need. Does that sound familiar? It is like those people who only call their friends when they need something. Over time, those relationships grow cold and weaken. For him, this kind of prayer is like wanting to harvest without having sown. Imagine having a garden and only watering it when the plants are about to wither. What would happen? Most likely, when you finally want it to bloom, it will be too late. This mistake is so serious because it creates a superficial relationship with God, one that is based solely on moments of crisis. It is like building a house without a foundation. When the storm comes, it collapses easily. Prayer should not be just an emergency resource, but a daily habit that strengthens our connection with God at all times, not just when we are desperate. Padre Pio reminded us that a grateful person is never completely sad, because even in the darkest moments, there is always a small light. We do not need great reasons to be grateful, as the most important blessings are often the simplest: health, family, a roof over our heads, a plate of food on the table. When we learn to see life with gratitude, we realize that we are more blessed than we ever imagined. However, one of the gravest mistakes in prayer is turning to God only in times of crisis. If we build a house without a foundation, when the storm arrives, there will be nothing to hold it up. But how can we tell if we are making this mistake? Padre Pio left us 3 clear signs. The first is when we only remember to pray in moments of distress or need, as if we had a spiritual emergency button that we press only when things go wrong. The second is when we struggle to maintain a prayer routine during peaceful times, forgetting to nourish our spiritual life when everything is going well. And the third is when our prayers are reduced to an endless list of urgent requests without moments of simple communion or gratitude. For him, prayer should be like the air we breathe, constant, natural, and necessary for life. We do not breathe only when we lack air. We do it without thinking because it is an essential part of our existence. To develop this habit of constant prayer, Padre Pio left us a simple guide. First, set fixed moments to pray each day. They do not have to be long. 5 or 10 minutes are enough. But the key is consistency. He said that a short daily prayer is better than an extensive one once a month. Second, take advantage of everyday moments to connect with God, while washing dishes, on public transport, before going to bed. He reminded us that any moment can be an opportunity for a small prayer. And third, create visual reminders, whether at home or on the phone, a picture, a phrase, something that helps us keep our connection with God alive. He suggested having these small spiritual alarms that would keep the flame of prayer burning. It is important to understand that constant prayer does not mean spending the entire day on our knees. Rather, it is about maintaining an attitude of openness and continuous dialogue with God, like a telephone line that is always open, even if we are not speaking all the time. And the greatest benefit of a life of constant prayer is that when difficult times come, because they always do, we already have a solid relationship established. It is like wearing a life jacket before the storm reaches us. He said that prayer is like physical exercise. We cannot expect to be in shape if we only work out when we feel unwell. True strength comes from regular practice, not from intensity during moments of crisis. Finally, the fifth mistake that Padre Pio considered a great obstacle in the life of prayer is the lack of humility. This is a subtle mistake because it can disguise itself in many ways, and sometimes we do not even realize we are making it. For him, Prayer without humility is like trying to fill a glass that is upside down. No matter how much water is poured, nothing stays inside. Too often, we approach God with a list of demands, as if we were entitled to everything we ask for. Padre Pio taught us 3 signs to recognize a lack of humility in our prayers. The first is when we pray believing that we deserve to be heard based on our own merits, thinking, I pray every day, I go to Mass, I help others, so why don't you listen to me, Lord? The second is when we become frustrated if the answer is not what we expected or does not arrive in the time we desire, as if we wanted to dictate to God how and when He should respond. And the third is when we compare our prayers to those of others. Why does He grant what they ask for, but not what I ask for? This comparison is a clear sign of pride in disguise. For Padre Pio, true humility in prayer is like the attitude of a small child asking for help from their father. A child does not present a resume of good deeds or demand deadlines. They simply trust and ask with simplicity. And the most beautiful thing about it is that when we pray with humility, we truly open ourselves to receive. He said that humility is like an empty vessel. The emptier it is of ourselves, the more God can fill it with His blessings. Before concluding, let us remember the 5 mistakes we have learned to identify and correct. Lack of attention, absence of gratitude, lack of trust, praying only in times of need, and lack of humility. If these teachings from Padre Pio on the power of prayer have touched your heart, I invite you to leave a thank you, Padre Pio, as a gesture of gratitude. This simple act helps more people receive these valuable messages of faith and hope. And if you wish to continue deepening these messages of protection and wisdom, be part of this space of connection and faith, where together we can build a community where peace and harmony become part of our path. May these teachings from Padre Pio be a seed that bears abundant fruit in your spiritual life and in every home. Prayer is not a magic formula, but a loving dialogue with the one who loves us most. It is not just about asking, but about trusting, giving thanks, and keeping our connection with God alive at all times. As Padre Pio used to say, pray, hope, and do not worry. In this trust lies the true strength of the soul, because when we pray with faith, God is already at work in our lives, even before we can see it.